Hey guys, Chase the Trainer here, jumping on to make a video to talk about health and wellness and well-being and behaviour. I guess overall it's kind of my niche area of topics to talk about. And today I'd like to talk about a couple of books I've read recently and a very delicious metaphor that's been living inside of them that I have taken and absorbed and applied to my concept of how I think things work. And I think it fits really, really well. So I thought I would share this metaphor with everyone in hopes that it illuminates some versions of the way we can look at behaviour, and especially the way we can look at habitual behaviour and behaviours that we do all the time. So first thing I'll do is punch out my book recommendations. I'll show you the books that I got these from. They're both from the same author, Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett is her name. And the first one I got from her was called How Emotions Are Made, and it's a fantastic looking cover title. It's about the secret life of the brain. So the topics within this book talk about emotions and feelings and the way we conceptualize them in our life and between people, like interpersonal relationships between emotions and feelings, and specifically how our brain works and why it works that way. It's a thick book, and I found this one out of the two to be more, academic. It had a few bigger words in there, and I think that general knowledge of physiology would help if you were looking at picking up this book out the gates. But I will show you the other one that I had, which is a little bit thinner, and subjectively I think it has a cooler title page, right? The other one was cool. This one rocks it. It's called 7.5 Lessons About the Brain from Lisa Feldman Barrett. And similarly, it also talks about the brain, how it works and why it works that way, but not in the sense of emotions and feelings as much, more in the sense of what gives our life meaning and can help us live a longer and healthier and happier life. And it's a little bit more digestible, I guess. The way I read them, this one here first and this one here second, I felt like I did it the right way, because after reading this one here, I felt like I had a good base knowledge of the topics she was talking about. And then when I hit this one here, it really solidified some of the concepts. So if you're interested in these books, they're great. I would rate them. They're a great way to look at the brain and really change the way we may view things. So one of the biggest takeaways that I had from this is a real change of mindset when it comes to the way that our brains work. And I'll admit that before I read this book, I was a subscriber to the Trewian brain model, where of the reptile brain, the emotional brain, and the cognitive brain having 3 different levels. And through learning more about the brain, I understand how much of a metaphor that system was. Whereas I think beforehand I subscribed to it in a literal sense. And I guess that was probably the greatest change of mind I got from reading these books. The second one is thinking about the brain's function and its purpose and why we even have it. And I guess we intuitively feel that our brain is something that houses all of our thoughts and all of our ponderings in our mind, and it's what we use to make decisions about things. And it's something that we store a bunch of memories in that we can pull up anytime we want to reminisce about things that have happened in the past. And through reading these books and gaining the concept, I now understand that it's almost like a simile, or no, it's definitely more metaphorical, that's what our brain's purpose is, because the bottom line is that it's our brain's job is to keep us alive, and by budgeting our behaviour and budgeting our body, so our energy intake and outtake, and making sure things are running smoothly. And the way that our brain does that is by setting predictions of what it thinks the future will be like, based on our past experiences. So in a sense, it's a bit of an accountant, and it does the ins and outs, and the way that it predicts the market's going to go is from how the market has behaved in the past, and it can choose whether or not to make deposits, or buy shares in this section and sell shares here, and know when to draw from the bank and when to make sure we're putting in deposits into the bank to keep our accounts in the green. Yeah, I guess that's not a bad metaphor, but I'll get to the main story here. So Lisa talks about trying to imagine our brain as being a brain in a box. So a brain that's completely covered in darkness with no information from the outside world. And from here, it then has created secondary organs that allow it to receive information from the outdoor world. So we have our eyes that are there to take in light wavelengths at different levels. We can differentiate between colours. We have ears that do sound pressure. We've got touch, so we can feel different textures. taste, our senses that we all use every day, take for granted most times, and also our blood chemistry, so what our body is doing at any given point, the angles of our joints. These are all senses that our brain has some awareness of. But it's also the only information that our brain is aware of. It doesn't have a real picture of what reality looks like. It only has the information that its tools allow it to measure. A good way to, I guess, make this even more of a metaphor is to talk about if you were given a cube and you were given a measuring stick that only had inches written on the measuring stick. What information could you tell me about the cube? You'd be able to tell me how many inches it is around the edges. However, if your measuring stick was in millimeters, the concept or the information you could give me about the cube would be different, even though they are measuring the same thing. So just that, giving an illustration of the limitations of our measuring devices really affect the way that we're able to experience what reality is. And now that I say that, it sounds very hippy-dippy, but it still stands. So the way that our brain uses this information to make predictions is it draws on times in the past of where we have experienced similar things or where we have made similar measurements. So when we have a cube and we've measured it with our inch-long ruler, and we know it's 4 inches this way, 6 inches that way, and 2 inches that way, and we know what we can do with that, the tools, the tasks that we can do with this cube. It can, I don't know, I'm trying to think of the actual structure. It makes a great oblong. It's a good phone stand to rest my phone against. In the past, I may have used it to prop up a table. In the past, I may have used it to sit a hot pot on because it's made of wood, and I know it has these attributes to it, and I know that those are things I can use it for. Then, if I was ever to come across another block that was the same measurements, I used my tools to measure it again, and it was 4 by 6 by 2. I could then expect that that block is going to behave in a similar way, because in the past, that block, or there's something with those measurements, acts this way. So in the future, things that fit that same concept in my head, of block of that size, will also fit those same roles. However, if one block was made of wood, like the first one was made of wood, and it was handy for all those tasks that I use it for, and the second block was made of ice, I may come into a situation where my brain's predictions are wrong. When I go to put my hot pot on it to use it as a bit of a protector for my table, it would fizzle and boil, in which case suddenly I would get new information, fizzling, boiling, melting, wet on my bench, and my brain would have to quickly do an error correction to find out, hey, where did my prediction go wrong? How can I update my concepts for later in the future that not all bricks of the shape and size have all the same attributes? And we can see that process colloquially is known as learning. We've learned something new there. And now, thinking back, that is a long way to explain what the process of learning is. But in general sense, that is what learning is we're able to add new elements into concepts that we already have, and the concepts we have rely on the information that we've experienced in the past. So now, how does this relate to things like behaviour? So similarly, where we looked at a cube of wood, and we've measured it, we've used all of our tools to take all the information we have to build a concept of what this cube is, and then we can predict that cubes in the future will behave a certain way. We do that same learning of a concept when it comes to our environment and when it comes to other people. So I'll probably throw this back to things like childhood upbringing, because that's where a lot of my learning has been. If you grew up in a household where at dinner time you were always given huge bowls of food, so much food that you could never finish your plate because it was bowls and bowls of food. And it always happened at dinner time, and it always happened where your family sat around you, similar time of night, similar people around you, and obviously you're eating, so your blood chemistry that your brain's measuring is saying, hey, I'm hungry, I've got ghrelin going on, and it's telling me my appetite's getting bigger. If you have had that for, say, 18 years through childhood and adolescence, then in your 20s you go back to your family's home and you sit down at the table when all your family's around, it's late at night, your blood chemistry is saying you're hungry, your brain is predicting the next thing that I'm going to see and I'm going to feel and I'm going to experience is a big bowl of food. And if you don't receive that, it'd be just the same feeling you'd have with the ice cube, that your brain would have to do an error correction and say, oh, hang on, maybe earlier in the day when I was predicting that this was going to happen, maybe some of my budgeting didn't work out for the future that actually eventuated. So maybe we withdrew too much from our bank earlier in the day because we were expecting or we were predicting that night we were going to have that big family dinner meal. So that's one sense that our prediction can affect the way that we react to our reality and how it can mismatch with what actually happens. Similar senses when it comes to habitual behaviour and the way things that we get habitually stuck in, and some of those behaviours that we wish we didn't do that we would like to change and affect, and we find that changing that behaviour is incredibly hard. I'll pull one out that's a really common one. Say cigarettes. It's pretty mainstream now to know that smoking cigarettes is not the best thing for your health, and a lot of people that do smoke cigarettes are actively trying to stop, and even people that aren't actively trying to stop, those people are still aware that it may not be the best thing for their health. However, what makes not smoking cigarettes so hard? One, it's chemical dependence. That's up there. But two, well, in fact, chemical dependency relates to this concept as well, because it's our brain wanting to have that nicotine or those chemicals that flow through our brain, and it's predicting, I know at 2 o'clock after lunch, I get a rush of that nicotine. It sensitizes my dopamine and it makes me really enjoy this activity. When you don't smoke, your brain is predicting to have that, so it budgets for that eventuality, and then when you choose, no, I'm not having a smoke today, your brain will be trying to get back into the gear. It'll be mismanaging your assets, and it will encourage you to pick that smoke up because that's what it budgeted for. Same sense for not a chemical dependency, like habitual behaviour. A real common one is waking up and having a cigarette with a coffee. And that is the same thing. Like if we wake up in the morning and we sit down with a coffee in a chair outside and we taste the coffee and we smell the coffee and then we have a smoke after, every time we wake up in the morning and sit in that chair and we have the smell of coffee, our brain is getting that information sent into it. I'm sitting in this position, the feeling of my chair that I'm feeling on my arms and my back is the same. I've got that smell of coffee coming through my nose. I'm tasting the coffee in the warm drink and I'm feeling like I'm waking up. Your brain can start to predict, okay, the next thing that's going to happen is I'm going to have a rush of nicotine. And it's going to encourage that behaviour over anything else because that's what it's budgeted for. Now, what can be hard about trying to shake behaviours like that really is that our environment is one quite permanent to us. It doesn't change that regularly without a bunch of conscious work. Without you throwing out the chair and choosing not to have a coffee in the morning, without completely disrupting your routine, it's very, very hard to change that behaviour in that sense. And it's also very hard to change our complete routine in a way that's sustainable. The one thing that I always say around making changes, especially around health, is that it doesn't pay to try to change everything at once. It can be more harmful to change everything at once than it can be just to change one or two things at a time. However, by not changing everything at once, we are entering into this danger zone where our brain's predictions can set us off into this poor budgeting decisions and leave us in the red, which doesn't make us feel good in the interim. And I guess really that's the look of what is long-term, what is gratification delay. It's your ability to bear through being budgeted into the red for a while so that you're able to more easily budget your body or achieve your health goals in the future with proper predicting. So why is it so hard to change habitual behaviours? Because our brain is a prediction machine. It wants to keep us alive and it loves routine and it loves reading its environmental cues to know what's going to happen next. Unpredictability sucks for our brain. Unpredictability is expensive for our brain to manage energy wise. So the more predictable it can be, the more likely it is you're going to live longer, and the happier your brain's going to be, or the happier the accountant in your brain's going to be when it comes to managing your health, right? So we can see that we are really fighting against our own physiology just by trying to change a behaviour. And that's why it can take more than 7 attempts to change anything in a long-term way. ways that we can make this easier, which is probably the big call that everyone wants to have is, I've got a behavior I want to change. How do I change it? If you were to make budgeting changes with an accountant, does it make sense to try and change your complete income stream and try to change all of your liabilities and all of your outgoing costs, and then hope that your accountant's able to manage all these changes all at once? It doesn't make much sense, no. What does pay to make sense is to slowly change your income stream and your liabilities and your exports so that your accountant isn't shaken up too much. Because the more your accountant's shaken up, the less able they are to manage anything. So it does come to small, gradual changes, and understanding that it's a prediction. The feelings you have, impulses you have, and habits you have, it's all about your brain trying to predict what's going to happen next. And just because your brain predicts something's going to happen next doesn't automatically mean that it has to happen next. We do have a bit of self-control in that sense, that we can change our future behaviours based on what our past behaviours and past experiences are like. Cool. I feel like I may have run in circles there, but I'm completely open for further clarification. More questions is great too. Again, this is a great topic. I will probably speak on this again because I find it super interesting, especially behaviour. Again, I'll show these books. How Emotions Are Made, The Secret Life of the Brain by Dr. Lisa Philbin Barrett. And the second one with the cooler cover, subject to the cooler cover, 7.5 Lessons About the Brain. Same author, same name. And again, I would rate these to anyone who wanted to learn more about how the brain works and how their brain works. I've found them both quite illuminating. Sweet. I'll talk to you guys later, hey?